Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being on this call with us today. I know, Renaja, we spoke very briefly last week, but I want to take the time to introduce myself and the other committee member. My name is Jasmine Hicks, and I'm an administrator. I've been in education for approximately 6 years. So, thank you again for taking the time to discuss with us and interview for this position.
Good afternoon, Renaja. I'm Latasha Burns, and I have been in education for about 21 years now. I am an instructor presently in the Medical Science Academy and happy to interview you for this position.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Would you care to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Naja, and I've been a teacher for about 2 years. I've done science teaching for 10th grade at another location. Truly love my job, and it was awesome, and I'm just very happy to move on to the next big opportunity.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Well, this interview will be very casual, laid back, as we're all, working from home virtually. So, no pressure. Don't be nervous, and I will jump right in. If there are at any given time, if you have a question or a comment or you need anything, just let me know. Okay.
Will do. Thank you.
So, can you briefly share a little bit of background experience that has led you to choose a career in education?
Absolutely. Well, I would have to say that my love for education started way, way long ago when I was young and first in school. I just remember always being in class, and people would call me a teacher's pet, kids. But I always knew that I wanted to do this. It was never a question for me. I just love learning. I appreciated teachers who, you could see their passion, and I always knew that I wanted to do that. So that, from the beginning has always led me straight into education, and luckily I have been able to jump in feet first into a career in education, and I'm looking to definitely continue my experience.
Good. That's good to hear. We always have that one teacher that leaves a positive impact on our lives to, be a role model to sway our thinking and maybe, in the future go into education. And look, here we are. That's awesome.
Absolutely. I've had a few of those. So very, very excited to hopefully be that for someone else.
So, Renaja, in your experiences through teaching, can you give an example or some ideas of how you learned from your experiences that will help you in the classroom setting and as a colleague as well?
Absolutely. Well, while it is difficult to sum up what I've learned during the past 2 years in one sitting, there are certain elements that have been very important in helping me develop professionally as an educator. The coursework has allowed me to cement much of the theory with actual situations and experiences. The continued and focused effort and effective lessoning and/or unit planning has been very enlightening and useful. My prior experiences with this emphasized flexibility and quick reactions. There was a benefit to this as it allowed me to become more comfortable and comfortable with sudden classroom changes. But now as the detailed process is known, I feel especially confident of my planning abilities. Related to effective planning was the work done with curriculum and standards of both at my previous campus. The lesson may have had a specific focus, but time always had to be spent on prerequisite skills needed to understand the material. I became good at creating lessons that addressed multiple levels of student ability, and what I've learned about the standards had increased my skills that much more. There were many times over the past year listening to colleagues or reading textbooks when I had a ah that's why moment.
You have to love those that's why moments.
Absolutely.
You know, the
Yeah.
thing about standards, the standards, they're ever changing. It seems like, you know, you have to keep up with the times. You have to evolve as society evolves. So it's really important to stay abreast of those changes. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Burns?
Absolutely, absolutely. Those aha moments are definitely beneficial in the learning that we have through our experiences. So yeah, definitely agree. So great examples and great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, moving right along, how would you handle a student who is constantly disruptive or defiant inside of the classroom?
Well, I feel like it's first and foremost, it's necessary to maintain a healthy relationship with your students. You know, if it starts very early, then it's your job to quickly establish a relationship with those students and try to learn them, because most likely, more often than not, that student has, you know, those certain behaviors because of something deeper. It's not just, you know, a surface level all the time. So the quicker you can learn that student and meet them where they are, the quicker you're able to, you know, redirect that, or, you know, kind of work with them to keep that type of behavior at the end of their list. So when they're coming into your classroom, they're not, you know, they're not looking forward to being disruptive. They're actually excited for what you have planned because they enjoy coming to your class. So that's something that I feel like will first and foremost help you redirect that type of behavior. But, you know, even furthermore, aside from that, it's also important to regularly check in and focus on the solutions rather than the problems, which would cause, you know, a reduction in disruptions in the classroom.
I think that's a perfect answer, and you said a few things that stood out to me. You know, building those relationships with your students, being able to establish those relationships early on sets that standard for the school year. And so I think that when you have those standards set, it sets a tone, and you can also find ways to build respect and honesty with your students. And it's, you know, reciprocated both ways. And so just being able to figure out what your students are interested in and just being able to build that respect will help set the tone for your classroom style for sure. I think that's really important. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Burns?
I totally agree. I was just gonna say, definitely, I appreciate that you said relationship building, and I think you have to set that on day one. I mean, you have to establish that you are the boss in this classroom, but we're all a team, and that the efforts and the experiences that they bring into the classroom will definitely be reciprocated. I often tell my students, you know, students will be students, kids will be kids, and they'll like to bring you a problem. But for me, I appreciate that you said focusing on solutions, because if you bring me a problem, let's bring a solution as well. And let's just talk through that process to develop those relationships. And not only with the student, I think it's very important to establish those relationships with the parents and family members at the beginning of the school year. So that just helps alleviate any problems, hopefully, down the line. So really good. And I just have a follow-up question regarding, especially with the relationship building. So my question is, how do you cultivate positive relationships with your students and create a sense of class community?
Well, I think the most important thing is to show your concern for the emotional well-being of your students and describe your plan for developing students' social and emotional learning skills. I feel like your students have to be able to connect with you, to hear you, and to learn from you. If you're not establishing that sense of trust early, then they're not going to receive, or, you know, furthermore, because my goal is always to make a lasting impact. They're not going to remember. And I don't want to be a teacher that someone is like, I can't remember who my 10th grade teacher was. What was her name? I don't want to be that person. I want my students to come back and visit me, and later, once they graduate and get older, we can become friends on social media, and we stay in touch. It's relationships, honestly. And I still talk to some of my old teachers, and as I'm older, as I've grown, as I've gotten older, it's just kind of nice seeing those older teachers and how they've impacted me. And so, aside from a relationship with just my students and myself, I think it's also really important to establish relationships amongst my students within themselves. A lot of the times, these students have been with each other since kindergarten. You're zoned to a certain school, and if you live in a certain area, you're going to be with these same students up until you graduate. So they already are going to have a strong sense of community within themselves because they've known each other for so long. And when you're able to get them to depend on each other and you establish yourself in that unit, I've seen how it works. And that's something that's really important to me. So it's all about, it's not just the textbook. It's not just the curriculum. You want to make sure that everyone is trustworthy of each other, respectful of each other, and can learn from each other. And that's how I feel is the most successful way to establish a long learning community.
That's a wonderful answer. That is
Great.
really, really good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Well, moving forward, tying it all together, I wanted to ask you, so if you could explain your teaching style or philosophy. You already, semi-hit on it already, but what would you say is your teaching style or your teaching philosophy? So I know, for me, I always say, give all, take nothing. And so for me, that means giving all I have into perfecting my craft of education and taking nothing for granted as far as the relationships, taking no relationship for granted, taking no opportunity for granted, no experience for granted, because there's learning opportunities in all that we do. So what would you say is your teaching philosophy?
Well, for me, I feel like having one teaching style is ineffective. I think that if you rely on only one teaching style, you're going to only impact one type of student. And you have to realize that you can't, as much as we use the word student, that's just one characteristic that bunches a whole variation of different types of students together. So we have this group of students, but within this group of students, no one student is the same. So I feel like my teaching style is flexible. That is my teaching style, flexibility. It's if I have to put a meme up, if I have to do a new TikTok dance, if I have to, I don't know, read them a book. It depends. It depends on the student. It depends on what they're responsive to. It's a learning experience. I don't ever recall doing anything the same twice. So I would say that my philosophy, my teaching style, my philosophy is don't do the same thing twice unless it works. And if it works, do it better the next time.
So you have like an adaptive style. That's really good. I like that because my philosophy is, and for my students and in my classroom, is work hard, play hard. And that's in life too, in general. But I always like to reward my students for a job well done. So if we get in and we grind and we do what we need to do and everyone does well, you get rewarded for that. So I like that philosophy of being adaptive to the student and to that learning environment. So really good. Yeah, you got to be flexible because you're right. No two students or one student is the same as the next. So you definitely have to meet them where they are. So good job.
Absolutely.
And piggybacking off of that, because Dr. Burns, you are correct. It's very important, as you know, to differentiate. So I do like your adaptive approach, being able to reach all students where they are, and being able to differentiate inside of the classroom with your classroom activities, whatever, you know, you're doing, whatever assignments. But I found that being able to incorporate things that the students are interested in inside of your classroom activities go much further inside of the classroom, and that in turn also helps establish those relationships. And you know, I think the kids appreciate that. So job well done.
Cute that you said TikTok too, because I was like, "What is TikTok?" But I recently learned that in my classroom for my students.
Everything is forever revolving and evolving.
Yeah, because I'm like, a clock? What does a clock have to do with anything?
The kids keep us young.
I'd say they teach me so much.
So funny you say, Ms. Hicks, about differentiation, because that was gonna actually be my next question, like how to use data, because I'm on the performance committee at our school. I'm sorry, the performance improvement committee on our campus, and I always like to look at ways we can improve and do better for the campus itself, as well as for our students in their family environments. So my next question would be, how do you use data to differentiate instruction and support students identified with specific learning disabilities so that all of the students can learn and benefit?
Well, my number one thing is meeting students exactly where they are. No less, no more. You have to find out where they are, and that's your start. And from there, is like I said earlier, it's about maintaining relationships, and within those relationships, you learn how to, you know, properly and most effectively teach those students. Like I said, no two students are the same. So you have to be able to be flexible, be adaptable, and find different ways to teach so that your students can learn. So for example, I use different learning stations where, you know, students have the freedom to choose their station that's applicable to the lesson. So if I have a certain concept that I'm discussing in my class, then I will have different opportunities after, you know, explaining the content, and I give them different ways to apply what they've learned. So I've found that the learning stations kind of give me a sense of how my students learn best. And for the next session, if there's a station that wasn't as popular, or, you know, students didn't find as effective, then I'll move to the, you know, to the stations that did work. Also, I pay really close attention to the type of learners that I have in my classes. So if a student is more visual or tactile or auditory or a kinesthetic learner, I pay attention to those things, and I incorporate those to my lesson plans. Playing a video, maybe having them do a real life application, or having them do something hands-on. Those type of things, I try to incorporate all of them because, like I said, I have a whole variety of students. So being able to be flexible and cater to all of your students at the same time so that no one's losing interest is something that's very important to me. I also, like I said, I like to do real world application. I like to do I like to do real world application in the sense of setting goals and the sense of doing reflective assignments as well, because at the end of the day, when they leave my classroom and go out into the real world, only about 50% of my content will actually be applied to their day-to-day lives. So I want to make sure that that other 50% is something that they can carry with them throughout the rest of their lives.
Wow.
Great points. Great point. I
Yeah.
love the goal-oriented learning, because in life they're going to have goals that they have to set all the time, and going back to the reward system, when they reach their goals, it helps them to be successful, first of all, but also understand that if you set your mind to something, you can achieve what you set to achieve. So having that that goal oriented, those types of exercises, and having some kind of outcome at the end of all of that, that definitely helps with progressive learning. So great.
Thank you.
And I also think that having a variety of assessments, whether it be checking for understanding through the use of formal or informal activities, whether it be quizzes or tests, being able to use all of the different type of senses to stimulate all of your students and to reach all of your students is amazing. So good job.
I have found that my students love competitive games. So I Jeopardy them all day, all night. They love buzzer games. It's the whole slew.
That sounds like a classroom that I would actually enjoy visiting, for sure. I'm all about games. I'm super competitive, so yes, I look forward to that for sure.
Absolutely. Give them something to work for.
Yes.
Yep.
So, how would you say you keep your students engaged and motivated, and how do you promote your students using their voice to help them become self-directed learners?
So instead of doing a final, I never do a formatted final exam in my classes. I instead let them choose a topic of their choice that we have covered over our school year, and they present it. They teach the class, and I feel like that has been a very effective way of confirming their knowledge, because they also allow collaboration. So they help each other with their assignments, and they're learning from each other, and no one is allowed to have the same topic. So it's basically a all-in review at the end of the year. So it makes them accountable for the information, and I feel like you aren't able to learn anything, or you aren't, if you're teaching it, that means you've learned it. So I feel like that has been a very engaging route, and they tend to love it, because they're like, "Ooh, we don't have a real final exam. Got to trick them." So that has been super cool. It's been really effective in promoting, professional speaking skills, presentation skills. It's been interesting to see their innovation and creativity. They have taught me so many things to do with PowerPoint, and I'm like, oh, look at your transitions, these colors, these slides, y'all are doing it. So it's been really cool to kind of see them, kind of step in as a teacher, and I'm learning from them. Like I said earlier, we're all learning from each other, and they get all dressed up in professional wear and attire, and they get really excited for it. So that's something that I kind of nurture them from the beginning to prepare for throughout the entire school year. I give them these different tips, and we work on our professional development. We work on our presentation skills by doing many presentations. We do things to prepare for this big end of year presentation, and it's been great. They still talk about it. Some students come back in the hallways, and they still they're going to come to me and say, I wish one of my other teachers did this. It's their favorite.
It's awesome. I definitely think that's a great technique for engagement, that peer teaching and the group presentations. And it also builds a plethora of skills other than, the presentation skills. It also teaches them how to work collaboratively together. So I definitely think that's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree too. I like the idea of a flipped classroom. I really think that's a wonderful strategy to use. You're building little instructors later too, as you prepare them maybe to teach a classroom in the future. So we definitely need future educators. So kudos to you for that. I also like the idea that it gives them a sense of responsibility. It helps them explore and discover new insights as they connect. I'm sure they enjoy not having the traditional final exam, whether it be writing a paper or taking a Scantron test of multiple choices or whatever. It sounds like you make it more exciting for them, and they probably don't even realize they're learning since the classroom's flipped. So that's a great strategy in helping them to learn.
And that's my exact goal. They have so much stress already. They have way more stress than I feel like I had when I was growing up. They're dealing with a lot more. So, it's good to see them get that, we'll call it a break, but yeah, it's still a test. They just don't know it. But it's awesome. I think that it does help them, maybe be able to focus on those other, what they call nerve-wracking tests. So I'm glad to be able to kind of help them out a little bit.
Yeah, you're really preparing them for future, and that's a nicely way into my next question about how do we teach this 21st century generation of learners? How do we integrate technology, and how do we guide students to be global citizens? Because, the classroom is the classroom, but they have to be able to live in this changing environment outside of the classroom. So how do you teach the 21st century learners to integrate technology and guide them to be good citizens?
Well, I encourage my students to think critically, creatively, and always use their good communication skills. I try to make technology as applicable as I can in my classroom assignments. I incorporate technology while teaching various concepts because I know that there's value in presenting technology. It's purposeful, it's connected to their learning and real world situations. So I love the smartboard. Smartboard is my best friend. It helps, it's like a chalkboard, but with technology. They got good stuff. They have some good stuff now. It's great to be able to meet them where they are because their hands either always on their phones, they're always scrolling and double tapping to like something. It's really cool to integrate that. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about a new assignment that maybe I can incorporate. Sidebar. But I love using technology because they feel like it's a treat, because most classrooms have like a no cell phone policy, but I encourage them to pull out their phones and learn how to use those phones to get information. Information is literally right at their fingertips. Use them to find out anything that where maybe we were looking in encyclopedias or asking around. I want them to, be able to use those resources that they have. The resources that they have are incredible. So, and the fact that they are, like, they're right at their fingertips. Literally. And I'm just thinking we didn't have that when I was growing up. So I just love how excited they get and how good they are at it. Sometimes I'm scrolling for days trying to tap and find something, and they're like, look, here it is, I already pulled it up. I'm like, okay, now I got it. But I feel like they are already the future. It's just awakening what's already inside of them and teaching them how to recognize what's inside of them. You just have to, stay on them because it's so easy. It's so many distractions in those phones as well. But if you teach them and show them things that they might not have considered, then it's using the best of technology and it's giving them a head start. And I've even tried to incorporate coding in my classes because it's something that